I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're listening to Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs, and the sins of the underworld. We're Ireland's top podcast for 2025, and now we've got a new website. So if you want to learn more about crime and criminals, if you want stories, extras, and podcast subscriber specials, go to www.crimeworld.com. As disturbing as it's been to delve so deeply into the murder of 21-year-old Katie Simpson, it's also been a massive learning experience for the Crime World Presents team. The number of women touched by Creswell's depravity is breathtaking. It stands to reason that at least a few of them have chosen to speak out. Their insight into how coercive control and abuse can be executed has been invaluable and gives us a window into the kind of power Creswell wielded over the women he targeted. The stuff that other people see from the outside, a victim's fear and inability to leave, can be frustratingly impossible to witness and understand. But as the experts and others who have suffered this kind of exploitation know, it can take time before a survivor feels able to make a move. And it can depend on a huge number of factors. For instance, the support of a family who might struggle with your behaviour but are willing to wait for you to get to that place where you feel ready to leave. Abigail Lyle is the most high-profile victim of Creswell's abuse. It's not a role she ever asked for, but her bravery and determination to see him convicted is extraordinary. She's spoken out publicly several times about her relationship with Creswell and how, after only a few months, it became intensely abusive. The physicality of his attacks is extremely hard to listen to, how he regularly beat and strangled her. The first happened on St. Valentine's Day when, after a row earlier that day, he began to thump her senseless while they were out driving in his car. He repeatedly punched her in the stomach, in between bashing her head off the passenger window and the dashboard in front of her. After finally calming down, Creswell apologised to her profusely, reassuring her that he'd only lost it because he loved her so much and because she was so special to him. He told her he couldn't live without her and would never lose his temper like that again. But he did, over and over again. And for months, Abby continued to forgive him and go back to him. He was cruel to her, criticising her personality, her friends and family, telling her she was lucky to land a catch like him. He quickly and expertly eroded her confidence and sense of worth. He would constantly check her phone for messages from her friends and family, and anything he saw that he didn't like was cause for another attack. There was one occasion when he drove her over the border to a remote woodland and assaulted her so severely that she truly believed she was going to die that night. And why wouldn't she? That's what he kept telling her. Another time, he threatened to throw her into a bath filled with bleach. And again, Abby had no reason not to think he would follow through on his wicked promise. I'm Nicola Tallant, and this is Groomed, an investigative series from Crime World Presents. Episode 2, Close to Murder. From Bangor in County Down, Abby had just turned 23 years old when she met 21-year-old Creswell in 2008. Although from a strong and loving family, Abby was in a very vulnerable place when Creswell asked for her phone number at a horse show in Belfast. Her beloved older brother Matt had died in tragic circumstances a couple of years earlier. As a teenager, he'd got addicted to drugs and alcohol, which progressed on to using heroin. Despite years of rehabilitation and his family's support, he died of an overdose when he was 28 years old in August 2005. He'd been back home living with his parents and had been clean for some time. He and his family were hopeful that he was finally facing into a bright future ahead, but it wasn't to be. In the years following his death, his dad David, who ran an award-winning advertising agency, and mum Helen spoke out regularly about their experience with Matt, in the hope that it might help other families in the same position. Struggling to cope with her loss, Abby dropped out of college and was working in a clothes store in Belfast. But horses were her true passion. Being around them brought her peace. There was to be further tragedy for the Lyle family when her mother Helen was diagnosed with cancer at the end of 2008. By this stage, Abby was deeply besotted with Creswell, who preyed unrelentingly on her increasingly fragile state. Their relationship lasted less than a year, but from almost the beginning, Abby's head was turned by him, to the point that her family despaired. But they never gave up on her, knowing that if they pushed too hard, they might lose her forever. For her older sisters, Rachel and Joanna, it was very difficult, not to mention frustrating to watch. But that period for all their family was extremely challenging.
Matt died at the age of 28, I was 30, so Abby had just turned 20. And whenever our mum went back to work full time when I was about 14, so we were just at home, the four of us during the summer, and we always had the best of crack. But Abby and Matt were particularly close, and you would come in the afternoons and he would be making her mugs of tea, pints of tea and omelets. The two of them always would have sat and watched South Park and stuff like that. So they always got on really well, and he doted on her. He loved her so much. We used to have all these different names for her when she was a child, like Weebles and Abigail. She was really our pet. And so I don't know how she coped when he died, but it was an awful time for everybody. Like, it was so traumatic because he was found at home. I was in Dublin for the weekend, and he was found in his bedroom. So it was really, really bad for them all. And she then had to read something at his funeral, and she just got up and said, "I'm doing this for my big brother." So that was traumatic. She was 20. She'd been at Queen's and was doing a degree and dropped out. It just wasn't for her. And then she was working in retail, and she was working in Ted Baker, and she was doing really well, and she had great friends in the shop. And then she kept coming back to the horses because she'd always had a horse on the side. And then a couple of years into that, she was working full time in a yard. And I think that's when she met Creswell.
Abigail Lyle has given us an incredible insight into how an abuser like Creswell works. And she's explained how it took a lot of years for her to figure out that she was actually addicted to her toxic relationship. The thing is, you've all these conflicting emotions because you love the person, she's explained. And they know how to prey on you, how to prey on parts of you. Johnny definitely played on my empathy, made me feel sorry for him. He made her feel like a bad person, who was defiant and who could not be loved or valued without him. She believed she'd be ostracised from the community she loved if she left him, and that her life would be horrific. What people don't understand is that at that moment, when you are in so much pain and this person has beat you, called you names and made you feel so small and awful, when they then turn around and say, "I'm so sorry, I love you so much, I promise I will never do it again," it takes all that pain away, very temporarily, but they take it away and it's like a relief, and that keeps you there. It was fortuitous for Creswell that shortly after they got together, Abby's mother was diagnosed with cancer, leaving her in an even more vulnerable state for him to prey on.
Mum, Dad, Joanna and Abigail went to Barbados at the end of 2008. And when Mum came back, she was just like, "I'm just not feeling great. I haven't felt great for a while." She went to the GP and he said, "We'll test your liver. It's a bit dodgy, but you've just been on an all-inclusive. We'll see what happens." But Abby and Johnny, there'd been nothing worrying over that time. She'd been away with Joanna and the parents, and it had been great by all accounts. Because I do think that the first assault in February really shocked her, took her completely by surprise. So Mum was then in that process of seeing the GP, coming back. And then I think he referred her for a scan. And I remember on the Mother's Day, which was March 2009, Mum was in a lot of pain. And at this point, we'd all started to try and think what it could be. And I remember Joanna wasn't about and Abigail wasn't about. Mother's Day and Mum was annoyed. And I had come down from Belfast and I brought a dinner because we still had the grannies alive. So they were coming for their dinner. And there was no sign of anybody. And with hindsight now, that's just after that first assault had happened.
So she was, when that first assault happened, she was pretty much staying with him.
In and out. Yeah, it got to be that she stayed more and more and more because we then started to realise something was up and we started to ask. And that's then when we were the lying bitches that he used to say. So he went from...
And how did you start to suspect that from somebody who's coming into the house, who's charming and who looks like a really good boyfriend?
She started to withdraw. And she started to be... the memory I have of her is at Mum's bedside with the hat over her head. She would really... And she would still do this now. She'll withdraw if you push her too hard. And she just withdrew. And we could see that happening. And then Joe and I started to sort of query it and ask why and try and figure out what was going on. And then by the time when Mum was diagnosed in the April, she had to go into hospital and she was there for a week and we were there with her and Abby was in and out and it was fine. You know, she was in the hospital bed and we were in waiting for the doctor to tell us what was happening. And there was general great crack around the bedside. Abby was still pretty much there. You know, she wasn't withdrawn, but she was in and out. Whereas Joe and I were there all the time.
Mm.
And then, so she was diagnosed in April.
Would he be waiting outside to go with the lift? Or?
I think he would come and get her and then she would have to go. And then that went very quickly from the diagnosis to the Paris trip when she had to leave. And that I remember that was really awful. Mm. It was really upsetting that she had to go. And I can remember her and she would go to that withdrawal place where she wouldn't look you in the eye.
Was the phone always going?
Yes. Yeah. And, you know, I think we managed to get her for a lunch on the Sunday. We went on the Friday, Good Friday, and on the Sunday she left. And it was just hard. And I'm not sure if she'd come out with us for the lunch. I think she might have wanted to stay in the hotel room or something. She didn't, because she knew we would ask her about it.
Mm.
She knew we would poke her.
Did she tell you I have to go because he wants me to come home?
She would just have said that she had to go, she was busy, and I can't remember if she said that he wanted her to, but we knew the phone was going, and I think there was at least one time where we heard him shouting at her.
Right. So, and had he at some point sort of stopped coming to visit the house to be the charming guy? Had he tried to keep her away from you? He's sort of obviously...
I think it was a very gradual thing.
Mm.
And then with all of that stuff going on with Mum, it's hard to remember.
Mm-hmm.
And it was probably the ideal thing for him because she doesn't face confrontation really well. So she wouldn't have wanted to be in the house, when she didn't have to be.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't Mum and Dad sitting of an evening with a wee gin and tonic saying, oh, come in and take our daughter. It was very fraught and upset, and Mum was upset, and there was chemo going on. So it was the ideal time for him to get her where he wanted her to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think then it went very bad very quickly because there was no real visible signs in the April. But then by June, we could see it then. I think Joanna was able to say, because we then got her that night that we went out for dinner and she admitted it.
So what happened then, or when was that?
That was for my birthday at the start of June, and that's the last time we all had a meal together, and I have photos of it. It was a really lovely night, but she told us. And the good thing about Abigail is she can't hold her water.
She tell the whole family? Or
Yeah.
Just you two?
She told us all.
She told you all?
And then she went away to be with him.
And what did she say to you that time, Joanna?
I can't remember. Joanna would probably know. I just remember us being in the restaurant and it being that we were glad that she'd told us. And we thought as well that because she told us that would be a fresh start and that would help her move away from him. Mum was having chemo every 2 weeks and she went for the first couple to the hospital and then they gave her a PICC line, so she was having that at home. And then I was trying to take Fridays off to be with Mum and to do things with her. And it was just all very frantic. And Mum was initially very sick. And then after the first couple of chemos, the tumour went down. And then she just got really sick and died. And I can remember us being up at the cancer centre with her, during May, and things looked good. And he said, you could have a lot longer. And then within a few weeks, she was dead. It was really mad. But I will always remember that trip that they took to France because Dad had to go there for work and Mum went, and she was really upset because Dad had been off with his business partner and she was left with Joanna, and I think Mum was just generally pissed off, as you would be. And then she got home to find Abby in a real mess, and she phoned me on the Sunday.
When you say she came home and found her in a mess, do you mean that she was physically?
Yeah, she was physically badly beaten. I wonder if I could probably still get them on wallpapers. I could probably get them from somewhere. But she went down to a local firm of solicitors on the Monday morning, and I think something about the court wasn't sitting. So they took her the next day and they got the order that morning, and then Mum went into the hospice that afternoon for pain relief, and then she never came out. So it was wild. I think we realised that they hadn't separated the night of Mum's death because we couldn't get hold of her. And it was 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, I think, before she came to the hospital, and we'd all been there from about 2. And I think we thought that they were separated until then. And we realised they weren't. By that stage, it was very much them or me. He'd given her that choice. And then it just got worse, and the beatings got so much worse.
Until August.
Yeah. That was when he trampled on her stomach, and that was the only one. Like, the law was so bad, like then. Don't know if it's much better now, but they could only get him on the isolated incidents as opposed to a pattern of behaviour.
She obviously she could be in touch with the PSNI, but she has liaison.
She had Nuala.
She had Nuala.
Yeah.
So when did Nuala come along from the non-molestation order?
I think Nuala came along from July. I think
makes sense.
Yeah, I
She
think
was appointed her liaison with the non-molestation.
Yeah, because I think my dad contacted my uncle Ian, who knew Nuala, because Ian was in the police in another part, and he said to my dad, if there's a really good DVO, and then Nuala got on the case, and she was basically poised, I think, for a long time to put the statement in, but waited for the go-ahead from Abby, and Nuala really counselled her a lot, I think, at that time.
And what did you think broke it at that stage with her? She obviously came out of whatever we'll describe it as, that brainwashed point.
At that point, I think the relationship was really bad in the sense that he was dumping her all the time and she was dumping him all the time. And there was obviously the crossover with Christina. It was something to do with he wouldn't give her her boots back. And she just snapped, and that was it. And she never looked back from then. I just think she had to get there herself, didn't she? And she just thought, I'm going to die if I don't get out of this.
Yeah.
Abigail Lyle credits one person in particular for helping her to finally escape Creswell's clutches. Nuala Lappin, a specialist PSNI domestic violence officer. Nuala was contacted by Abby's dad, David Lyle, who was desperate for help to deal with his daughter's increasing withdrawal from her family. Understanding that the situation needed an expert, he found Nuala. Bringing her into my life was a massive, massive saving grace, Abby has explained. We kind of started a communication just on the phone for a couple of months before I left. She said, I know you're not ready to leave, but you can and you will. She was amazing. She was the only person who understood. Abby knew her family couldn't fathom why she refused to just dump Creswell for good. Nuala was the only person who truly understood why, at that time, I couldn't, she said. Having her advice is probably why I'm here today. Nuala Lappin has met hundreds of abusers down through her career. Every colour, creed, age and size. She's dealt with them intimately. She's seen the damage they've inflicted. She's interviewed them and asked them why they did it. When you're in a job that long, it stands to reason they begin to melt into each other. A long list of men who felt inadequate, who were abused themselves, or who were just inherently evil. But Jonathan Creswell stood out. She'd never met anyone like him before, and she never forgot him after. As it happens, Nuala and Tanya Fowles are really good friends. They met through the courts, two women of a similar age who have similar life experiences. They enjoy each other's company and respect each other's work. It's because of them, Jonathan Creswell's long history of abuse was brought to light and finally stopped.
Hi, I'm Nuala Lappin. I was a domestic violence officer in the PSNI from about 2003 or 4 until about 2015, 16. It's quite a complex thing, domestic violence, and a lot of people get quite... It's very easy to get very frustrated with it because victims tend to remain in a bad situation, including uniformed police would have come up and said to me why she's still staying or she's not cooperating and that kind of thing. So the role was to get our main offenders and get them to court and keep the victims and the general public safe. And sometimes she done that without the victim's consent, which could make it quite difficult too because they would withdraw their consent. But I loved it. It was a very interesting job. Definitely had its challenges, but you really did feel that you were doing something very useful.
Did you see it across all the demographic, all the various...
Absolutely. Again, it's another cliche about it that it only happens to low-income people or low intelligence. That's simply not true. It happens right across the board. We know that it could happen maybe 30, 40 times in a house before a victim... I'm going to talk in terms of females. I did deal with male victims too, and quite horrific cases. But we know it'll happen quite 30, 40 times before she'll report it to police. She could report it to police and then retract. No, I don't want to do that. But there are so many reasons why that happens, and it's so nuanced, and victims feel a massive loyalty to their abuser, and money's an issue, perhaps children's an issue. Rarely land could be an issue. There's the shame that comes with it, the guilt that comes with it. It's a massive issue.
So when did you first become aware of Jonathan Creswell?
I had never heard of him before until David Lyle, Abigail Lyle's dad, had reached out, which on its own was very unusual. If a family member came to speak to me about a concern about a daughter or sister or whatever, it was generally with frustration. She won't leave and this is happening, I don't know what to do. But he reached out and said he was very concerned for the welfare of his daughter. There was a lot happening within the family dynamic. That the mother was very ill. There was a lot going on. And it was genuine concern. And what can I do as a father? And can the police help? So I made contact with Abigail and she did meet me. She very much minimised what was happening to her, which would again be very typical. Although she had been keeping a record, she had taken photographs and that sort of thing, but she wasn't willing to pursue anything at that point. Again, doing the normal DV victim stance where she's making excuses for him and it's not his fault and all that's she's been taught that by him. So that's when I first heard his name. Again, knew nothing about him. I know very little to nothing about the equestrian world, but got from her that he was some kind of mini celebrity in the Northern Irish show jumping world. It would mean nothing to me. He was just another potential abuser.
So what do you do in that case? You just, you're warm to her, obviously, and you just give her your number?
You want to empower her to come to you. That's generally your best way around it. I would have kept in contact with Abby, kept in contact with her dad, and eventually I got a phone call to the office, which was amazing that she got me there, which is why, because I would have been in and out all day.
What time of day was it?
I believe it was in the morning, and it was a very panicked, very breathless call. She had ran out of his house in Caledon, made it to a phone box, and he was holding her there against her will. She was crying. The only information I wanted off her at that moment, where exactly are you? Where's he? And if I'm right, he had left the house to go to the shop. So that was why she had darted across the road to the phone box. So I went and told my sergeant where I was going and bounced into the car to go over and get her. Hadn't been in Caledon in my life before, so I'm panicking going, where is it? Where's his house? In that moment, that's what I was thinking about. So I found it, pulled up and my car was facing his back door and he comes barreling out at me. So I'm in plain clothes, I'm jeans and t-shirt or something, I don't know. And I had produced the warrant card to ID myself. Abby was standing at the back door, sort of very cowed, very shrunken. I could see her over him. So I call it like a mummy voice. And I kind of ordered her to get into my car, which she did. She took a wide berth round him and got into my car. He is now in my face. Who the F are you? Who the F do you think you are? She's going nowhere, blah, blah, blah. And this went on for a while. And he was left in no doubt that she was coming with me and this was not for negotiation. So she was very upset. That confrontation with him lasted a few minutes because once she was in my car, I was good to go. We left. I took her back to Cookstown. She didn't require anything medical at that point, but she was really upset. She spoke to her dad, I think, maybe her sister as well. And she then sat with me for several hours and gave me a whole detailed account. It was a 19-page statement of the whole history of their very short relationship. And it was awful. It was, he picked her up in Bangor and he was beating her in the car on the way up the road, like continuously hitting her. She tried to get out of the car at one point and he just continually punched her, took her across the border, strangled her into unconsciousness, over and over and over again. Like she would have described him sweating and screaming at her, and he takes her back to the house in Caledon. She wasn't allowed to make a noise. She wasn't allowed to alert the neighbours. And if she did, he was going to throw her into a bath full of bleach. Don't believe there ever was a bath full of bleach, but she believed he would do it. So it was horrific. What she detailed was horrific. I then spoke to Dungannon police station, the sergeant there, and explained what we had, explained the offences, and said, can you send uniform to go and get him and have him for me in the morning when I come in, which is what they did. So I come into work. Again, my only interaction with Jonathan Creswell was the day before. He was a lot younger. He was in his 20s. Slim, very angelic looking. Like he had quite striking eyes, but I had seen this very aggressive side of him the day before. So he comes in and completely different man, and unbelievably cocky, like unbelievable. I have done so many interviews throughout my time, and they're always really, they'll always say they didn't do anything, or they'll always blame their victim, always. He, of course, done that, but he added in how good looking he was, how accomplished he was, that she's a psycho. And I'm Mr. Altruism because I was helping her out, because I understand what's going on in her family, and I'm really, really concerned for her mental well-being. So I was taking her to help her. She punched herself in the face the whole journey from Bangor to Castle Leslie. She persisted to hit herself. She was trying to throw herself out of the car. Like, I am just this really good guy that was simply helping my girlfriend. And within him telling us that, he was telling us about his accomplishments in the equestrian world. I don't care about any of that. But I let him. I was just letting him talk, and I'm nodding at him and sort of encouraging him to keep going. And he's telling us how good looking he is and how many women find him really attractive. And he could have his choice of any women. And it was myself and another female detective were interviewing him. And he said, I'm sure you ladies can see how good looking I am. You should probably like me too. Now I've never had that in my life. I've never had somebody sit in an interview room and say that, ever. So it was it was astounding, and it was one I never forgot because of his behaviour. It was unbelievable. So there we have him the day before being Mr. Highly Aggressive. So in that moment, I probably saw him in that glimpse of what Abby had seen, just in that glimpse, because could he have hit me? Absolutely, he could have. He was filled with rage that I was there to take her away from him. Even though he knew I was the police officer, he knew all, it didn't matter. He was filled with rage. And there he's sitting with me less than 24 hours later, Mr. Cocky, sitting back in his chair with his legs wide, spread, taking the full spotlight of the room because we let him talk. Johnny just loves to talk about himself, so you just let him talk. And when it was finished, he sat back in the seat and he said to me, do what you like. I'm going home. And I thought, okay, you think? So I went out and spoke to the custody sergeant, and our view was we were holding him overnight to court the next day, and then brought him out and read these charges out to him. Again, the swagger, still cocky, still full of himself, arrogance dripping off him. So we brought him in, and there was 21 charges to put to him. And it's a minor detail, but what we normally do is the police would caution you and then remind you for each charge you're still under caution and what's your response. I cautioned him each time, and I did it in a very monotone voice. So I'm reading it off the screen, cautioning him, and it's quite a lengthy procedure. And it did go on some time, and out of the corner of my eye, I'm looking at him, and he got it, and I knew he got it in that moment. And I could see the panic starting to well up on him, and he understood he wasn't going home. He understood for the first time in his life he was going to be kept in a police station And he literally fell to pieces. He literally had a full-scale panic attack in the custody suite, to the extent where we had to walk him outside and give him a bit of fresh air and, can you breathe now? You all good? But it was the first time, I believe, he had ever been held accountable for anything in his life.
Tanya Fowles happened to be in court when she spotted her pal Nuala Lappin waving over at her.
She came over and said, I have a major case coming in, do not leave. The next thing, they said an overnighter had come in, and the judge was John Meehan, who, to my estimation, was the best in domestic violence cases. And they brought this man up from the cells, and he was small, slight, and they read out this litany of charges. And then Nuala's sworn in, and they're going to go for bail, so they have to open the facts of the case. And I kept looking up thinking, I couldn't believe it. The severity and the extent, it was, I think by that stage I was about 20 years in journalism. I don't recall ever hearing a case to that extent, certainly not at the opening stage. And all the while he is sitting in the dock, cutting quite a tiny, pathetic figure, going, you know, like a child that's been caught out, and they're going, you know, you're sort of saying, did you take the last sweet? And they're going, not me. And you know rightly they are, because they're holding the wrapper. And he was sitting there, and then every so often, you know, the big tears. And I thought, what's good? None of it made sense, but that didn't mean it wasn't true. I think the thing that stuck with me the most, because choking or strangulation was not a standalone offence at that time. That just went down as actual bodily harm, I think it was. And Nuala described how he'd put his hands about her throat. Now, the minute I hear that, I think attempted murder. It was just a horrendous litany, and he was refused bail. But what stuck in my mind was he came back and tried for bail on another occasion. And this time, a man who introduced himself as his father, James, was sworn in, but he was actually his grandfather. But a very nice man, you know. And how he said, you know, Jonathan, he hasn't a bad bone in his body. He doesn't have a bad temper. Well, I mean, he brings out the best in awkward people and awkward animals. And that got me, because that is not what Jonathan Creswell did. He may have brought out people, but he let them know that he then owned them. But he certainly was not good with animals. If he got results, it was because he had the animal in fear, and that in particular struck a chord with me. But he said he can come and live with me. And that, I think, was I didn't get bail that day, but he did get High Court bail. And at the next hearing, at the hearing that actually he spoke in, the barrister said, he has another girlfriend now. And we have previous girlfriends who will say that he was never like that. This is totally out of character. And they referred to their ongoing relationships and the number of people who were about. And clearly, they'd all circled and closed round him. And he got out. He didn't come back to Culloden or Tynan for quite a while. I do know that. Over that time, the stories were being pushed and pushed and pushed. And Jonathan this and Jonathan that, and every name that poor girl got called under the sun, that she was just trying to ruin him and all this.
Were you hearing these in the community?
Yes, I was. You couldn't go to a county show or anything where there was a horse that they weren't. Did you hear about that boy Creswell? All lies. All lies. And one of the most disturbing things that got me was, even after he'd served his jail sentence and he came back to Tynan, nobody believed it and was going, the doctor wouldn't have allowed anybody of that behaviour to be about the place. So everybody in that little hamlet put their faith in this yard. They wouldn't have, it's all lies. It's all, and I distinctly remember the ones who were saying it was lies, but they didn't sit in court.
Creswell was released on bail, and in February 2010, he pleaded not guilty to the catalogue of abuse against Abby. For the next few months, he was intent on the case going to trial, so he'd be proved innocent. He continued to draw women around him, and it seems he persuaded quite a few people in the Tynan area that he was just a man who'd been targeted by a volatile and jealous woman with mental health issues. Nothing could have been further from the truth. In September 2010, his case came to trial and a jury was sworn in. But at the very last minute, he changed his plea and did a deal where he pleaded guilty to some of the charges, while the more serious offences, including the kidnap charge, were dropped. References handed in to the judge included ones from show-jumping champions, successful businessmen, and his employer, Dr. Fitz Gillespie. In the end, he was sentenced to 6 months in prison, but as often happens between remission and good behaviour, he was released just 12 weeks later, just in time for Christmas, in fact. In an extraordinary, if not downright gross, show of support, his horsey friends threw him a party at the Armagh City Hotel to welcome him home. He'd successfully persuaded them that he was innocent and that Abby Lyle was just some crazy bitch whose pathological jealousy had landed him in jail. All the usuals were at the party that night, including his main cheerleader, Jill Robinson. There was also a new girl, a pretty brunette from Banbridge, 17-year-old Hayley Robb. Despite being super bright, she'd soon drop out of school to devote all her time to taking care of horses and being around Creswell. However, she faced some fierce competition for his attention, mostly from 15-year-old Christina Simpson, who was vying to be his number one. You've been listening to Groomed, a Crime World Presents limited series, edited and presented by me, Nicola Tallant. Written by Jane Finnegan. Contributor and researcher, Tanya Fowles. The series producer is Ian Malini. Nasa Kumaski is assistant producer.